John Owen Lowe is creator, writer, star, executive producer of Unstable. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby. Wanted to start things off, John, by saying you'll regret this interview, but we'll press ahead with it anyway.
I love
Uh,
that.
what for you is at the heart of Unstable?
I think the heart of Unstable is a father son or parent child dynamic that is very relatable, but with the circumstances given of Rob and I's particular relationship, it's a unique look at this relatable relationship where a parent is always going to irritate their child and they're always going to give them a hard time. But it just so happens I grew up with a parent who was in the public eye. And so no one ever agreed with me when I tried to tell people that he was wildly irritating. And there was something very funny about the dichotomy of that. And so we wanted to make a show about it so that people could laugh and relate and also go like, this situation's a little bit funky, isn't it?
Yeah. Did the show enhance the irritations between the both of you or help you work through them?
It definitely had its pros and cons. It had moments where we got to work through things. On the show, we tried to find organic moments of connection and problem solving, dare I say. And I do think that it highlighted some things in Rob and I's relationship that we hadn't got to vocalize. And so doing it on screen was cathartic for both of us. I think there was Rob playing a slightly heightened version of himself definitely was triggering for me at times, having to act across from that because it was like reliving certain moments of my childhood. But I'd say overall mostly cathartic.
Yeah. Do you reckon you and Rob would disagree on how heightened a version it is of
100%.
his?
Yes,
Yeah.
we would disagree on that. I would say it's about 10% off from who he is organically, and my dad would say probably like 30 or 40%, but
Yeah.
it's dangerously close is the truth. They're very close.
Yeah. Was there a scene that you resonated or you found particularly cathartic in the series?
Um, there's quite a few. The one that jumps to my head immediately, there's a scene in I think it's episode 2 where he's trying to get me to grieve a specific way for my lost mother, and he thinks he's cracked it by playing a song from my childhood for me and trying to reminisce when she was alive. And I give him this short speech where I say like, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, I'm going to grieve the way I want to grieve because that's what works for me. And if you don't like that, that is on you. And we've had so many moments in our relationship where he's tried to not change me, but shape me into what he thinks is the best version of myself. And I've had to work with him over the years and over a couple therapy sessions and say like, hey man, look, I'm not you. We may share a lot of similarities and we may have similar career paths and life paths, but I am my own person. And if you can't respect that, that is your thing to deal with, not mine.
Yeah, like it's interesting. There's two characters in the show, like Ellis and Jackson. In some ways, they are on a very different page, and there's like misunderstanding and miscommunication between the both of them. While at the same time, like such an important part of comedy is listening and communicating and bouncing off each other. So how do you balance the like how do you use listening and communication to make moments of miscommunication?
Well, I think that's sort of one of the foundations of comedy, right? Is like micro miscommunications happening in real time. And that is a truth for Rob and I's relationship, and for Jackson and Ellis's relationship is that Ellis and Rob are both not their intentions are pure, but they're just misguided in how they act on them. And so, you know, I could tell Rob or Ellis as Jackson, like, hey, I don't want any special attention. That makes me uncomfortable. And I find that both of them would react the same way. But in the show, we have Ellis, coming into the lab and saying like, hey guys, my beautiful son Jackson doesn't want any special attention. So I'm asking you personally as your boss to treat him as a normal kid, where it's like immediately you've blown that entire ask in the first 5 seconds. But the intentions are pure. He's trying to listen. It just doesn't compute. And I think that is the basis of so much of the comedy in our show. It does make me laugh. It also pains me.
And also like is there a scene you find particularly funny on the show?
My favorite scene, I mean, most of my favorite stuff is when I got to act across from Fred Armisen, who is like one of my heroes. And there's a scene in episode 4, which I'm partial to because I wrote it, but where I walk in on Fred's character, Leslie, the kidnapped therapist, and Ellis having a conversation about potentially traveling together. And I come down and try and reveal, a vulnerable truth about myself to help my dad out. And Leslie is just a bystander in the conversation. And I think there's one moment in particular where I say like, this is kind of an uncomfortable topic for me. And he says, if you want to talk about masturbation, this is a safe space. And it's just so out of left field. And I'm just like, no. And that was one of those rare moments, that was it was scripted, like Jackson reacts accordingly, like, no, thank you. And I just got to play with that where I'm like, let's see what comes up for me naturally. And it was hard not to break with him, but he is so refreshing as an actor and as a comedian. And that was my favorite scene, I think, personally, but there's so many to choose from. When Ellis playfully tells me I didn't need gloves when I was banging your mom in episode 7, that's also a favorite moment of mine. But yeah, I mean, look, the as far as the comedy goes in this show, the truth is, I don't know if this will I'm trying to articulate this because it's a tricky thing to point to get across, but like, you see the landscape of comedy right now is so unique in television, where like Barry is a comedy and Succession was a comedy and The Bear is a comedy. And those shows are phenomenal. Mind you, I love all 3 of those shows. I think they're fantastic. But I'm not watching those shows to relax and have a laugh. I can't watch those shows in any mindset. I have to be specifically tuned into that experience. This show was born from the fact that I and Rob and Victor, we missed the era of Parks and 30 Rock and New Girl and Arrested Development, like lighthearted. Ted Lasso does a good job of it now, but that's really one of the few examples I can think of. And even Ted Lasso gets really serious at times. But we wanted to try and occupy this space that didn't used to be such a brave space to occupy, but it seems like nowadays it kind of is, where you're just kind of like, hey, look, this is a semi-broad but smart sitcom that's just going to make you laugh and maybe make you feel, but we're not, the stakes are hopefully very relatable while being funny at the same time.
Yeah, like I think, like, and particularly with the kidnapping of Leslie, you have that sort of high stakes but such absurd funny situation and characters around that. Yeah.
It's like will someone watching it go like, oh yeah, it's like when I kidnapped my therapist? No, but they'll go like, oh yeah, this is like when my brother-in-law comes for the holidays and won't leave, or like whatever it is, the circumstances. There is an element of like, it's so absurd that it hopefully evokes some kind of like comedic response, but the heart of it is just simple and lighthearted.
I think those scenes with the 3 of you, with Fred, Rob, and yourself, like they're such interesting scenes because you've got sort of almost like Ellis getting pulled in 2 different directions. There's the little angel and the little devil on his shoulder, and that leads to some like real moments, but also some really funny moments. Like, you can talk outside of those scenes if you want, but how do like you as actors listen and support one another when building on those scenes and sort of add on what each other's offering?
I mean, because Rob and I's relationship is sort of the backbone of the show, and so I spent the majority of my time acting across from him. one thing I learned was Rob is the type of actor who sucks up air and energy when you're in a scene with him in a good way. I don't mean that as an insult to him, but he's so like his presence is so large that I think a trap some people can fall into in acting across from someone like that is to try and meet them there and butt heads. What I've found works the best with Rob, both in my actual personal life with him and on screen with him, is to let him do his thing, let that tornado spin, and I can operate around it. And it creates this sort of like organic ecosystem for us to thrive. And so it's like Ellis's character has all these punchy lines and he's so funny, so absurd. And Jackson is more of a straight man. He's the in many ways the eyes of the audience. So I took it upon myself to not try and outplay what Rob was doing, but to just genuinely react in the moment to like the absurdity of what he was occupying, because that is also again where the comedy comes from. And that, by the way, that applies because there's so many characters on our show. Like I said, Fred Armisen's Leslie, Aaron Branch's Malcolm is so funny, is the like acolyte to Ellis who can't see any faults whatsoever. The girls in the lab, Ruby and Luna, are they're so I learned very quickly to allow myself to just feel the natural reaction that Johnny would feel, because Johnny is very similar to Jackson, and then just play that on screen. So that was kind of how I approached it.
Yeah, it isn't. It's such a like the show's so grounded within the relationship between Alice and Jackson, but it is a callback to sort of those ensemble comedies of 30 Rock and Parks and Rec and Arrested Development, where you've got this crazy cast of characters all sort of bouncing off each other and branching off into different sort of episodes. We'll have different characters in A storylines and B storylines and stuff. It's really nice.
That's what we were hoping.
Yeah. But Jackson also has a few of his own quirks, like his flute playing career and his speeches about, is it frogs that he talks about? Yeah, frogs.
Real, man. I was obsessed with frogs as a kid. That's a real thing. Yeah.
So did you just ad lib that? Did you just go off like the cuff your speech?
Well, no, because I being in the writer's room, I got it was so enriching to be able to like pull from real data where it's like we know as a room we want Jackson to bomb at this speech. So like what are some pitfalls he could walk into? And I was like, that's where we got to like, maybe he just goes off on this frog tangent. It's really hyper specific about frogs because nobody fucking cares in this moment. So the frog thing is real. I have, hold on. Here we go. There's a little frog.
There you go. Oh, I love it.
My pencil holder. So yeah, that's an embarrassing fun fact about me. But I think again, write what you know, and comedy's grounded in reality. It was like, sometimes you don't have to get that creative. Sometimes you don't have to put that much spin on the ball. You just go with what's funny.
Yeah. Like there's some nice little touches on the show too, because like a big part of Jackson is that he plays the flute. And I believe like some of the little musical cues between scenes are little flute like pieces and stuff like that.
I love that you bring that up. So we, are the people who scored our show, Mark Foster and Sven, his partner, Sven Falconer, I think is his last name. I'll have to double check on that. But they're close friends of mine, and Mark specifically I've known for a while, and he's, a very prominent musician. He created Foster the People, and he's been writing music forever. And they did such a good job with the music of the show. And we spent so much time in the trenches with them, and they were like, we want the playfulness, and that comes out in these, woodwinds and these, the wind instruments. And then there's like this like childlike, little like bongo beat drums, but there was a heavy flute influence on a lot of that theme, and you can hear it throughout because that's Jackson, that's Ellis.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Do you have how does it compare, like being in the writer's room and collaborating in that space, and then going into in the cast and you collaborate in that space too?
It's totally different methods of assimilating, right? So it's like in a writer's room, you are all kind of like getting to know each other very quickly. Writing is a very personal thing. When you're pitching, it's like that. you have to trust the people around you to give your most vulnerable pitch. Otherwise, you're structuring every idea and like, what is this the funniest version? And you're, you know, self-editing, and that does not service a good, writing process. So you have to trust, and that takes time. And I got so lucky with our writers room. We had an amazing crew. And then acting, it's the same, but in a different way, in the sense that you need to trust them, but you're about to be physically vulnerable with them. You're about to like stand across from them and attempt to portray an emotion and hope that you evoke the response from them that is written. And so I'd say both things require a certain level of trust and also not taking yourself too seriously, which I've learned to do over time.
Can you think of a moment or a scene maybe where when you were performing it, it was playing out differently to how you imagined it in the writer's room?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first example that comes to my mind was, the date scene between Jackson and Ruby, where Jackson walks into it with his dad's advice of, just don't care. And Jackson misinterprets that and says it out loud, and the date goes very poorly. But on paper, that was it was sort of scripted to be energetically like a cute date up until the moment that it flops, that Jackson tries to take his dad's advice and it goes awry. Even though there's jokes, I mean, again, those scripts were almost airtight. Victor, is such a good leader, and that room was so funny that we didn't have to play too much with the wording. But energetically, we found that it was way funnier right at the start of that scene for it to just be palpably awkward and grow from there, just like the drop off was steeper than on the page. But there's a lot of examples of I think mostly like the general answer I'd give you is we pushed it even harder on the day of when we were shooting. On the page, it's like, the basis for these scenes to get ridiculous was there. And then the actors on the day of, we were like, let's make this silly, because silly is so fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. After speaking of you, I'm actually going to interview your dad. I'm going to interview Rob. Are there any questions that you think would be good to ask him?
Yes, I think you should ask him, what was your favorite Jackson moment, and see if he remembers any moment besides that of his own characters, because I doubt he will. And you can also ask him, say, who do you think, if anyone, Johnny would choose to recast you as? And I bet he'll say John Stamos.
Who would you recast him as?
John Stamos.
Oh, it would be, so that would be the correct answer.
That's kind of been our ongoing joke for years now, is that my dad hates it. I'm always like on his birthday, I'll post like a photo of Stamos instead of him and be like, happy birthday, Dad. So that one hits close to home for him. That's why I want you to say it.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. If he doesn't say John Stamos, I'll say, John Stamos would make a good Ellis.
God, please. I would love that.
Yeah.
By the way, I just have to point out that I like that you have the West Wing right next to the Emmys book, because it is important to me that Rob never actually won an Emmy for that.
Him and Martin, the two actors who couldn't win an Emmy for that show.
I'll tell you what, Martin really deserved one. He did.
Yeah, he did.
I know about it,
that second season, Two Cathedrals episode. Wow. Anyway, Johnny, it's been great chatting. Thanks so much. All the best of luck with the Rob couldn't win an Emmy for the West Wing. Hopefully Unstable can win some Emmys. So all the best of luck for the Emmy Awards coming up. People can go to goldderby.com to follow the Emmy Awards. And Johnny, thanks so much for your time today. This was lovely to chat.
Thank you. My parting comment will be that it would be the greatest irony of my life that I've given my dad a hard time about never winning an Emmy, and then we co-create a show that wins him an Emmy. That's just cherry.
So I can talk to him about never winning an Emmy for the West Wing.
Yeah. I hope that's all you talk about.
Thanks, Johnny. Have a good one.
Thanks, Matt.